Honey, look at those beautiful clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it the best can. Stand around and be blind to the frost can. Taking no more, how can they relax? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. Just wanna see your smile, baby. Living on earth, we must respect the earth. Human and animal, we all deserve the right to peace and opportunity. But nowadays we are...
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with another week of GeoEngineering Watch Radio. It's July 26th, 2014. We have Russ Tanner with us today, as always, without whom we would not have a show, thanks to Russ's technical ability and help. Also, there's others behind the scenes. Jules, thanks to you for making the show happen. You have Greg Palin with us today as well, and we'll get into commentary here in a few moments. I'm sure people notice how fast things are happening. They're happening very, very quickly. As our former paradigm unravels by the day, that picks up momentum quickly. And that causes a lot of stress for most people. Anybody sane that would certainly obviously cause stress for when the world we've known is completely unhinging. And it's actually, we're well into the curve, but the conditions that we've experienced are going to change much more rapidly as time goes on. And as we expose the climate engineering issue that so many of us have been fighting toward, we see a lot more pushback from the power structure. It's astounding how much pushback, even from their paid meteorologists like Wyckoff, I think is his name. I can't think of his first name, but supposed professionals whose job it is to deny what we see with our own eyes. That their job is to tell us that day is night, black is white, up is down. And unfortunately, a lot of people buy that because they've been trained to accept what the quote-unquote expert says. In Northern California, we're not going to accept this. In fact, some years back, the head of the North State radio stations, about 6 stations, the head of this operation, tried to get a meteorologist to debate me on the air. Tried 6 of them, I believe, from Northern California all the way down to Chico. And one accepted from a Channel 7 News, and she got her walking papers 2 days later. She was no longer employed there. Now, I don't know that there was a connection. I can't say that I know, but it was interesting timing. But now we have a meteorologist named Mike Kruger with Northern California Channel 7 News. It's an ABC affiliate, who's just made it his business to say anybody who believes they're geoengineering believes in a flat Earth. And this guy is really the epitome of spineless academicians who won't come out of the shadows to defend their disinformation. But there's a public campaign now that we've started to put pressure on that station to address the public. If this is his position, if this is the station's position, then they should back it up. If they have some sort of credible data that would set us all at ease that this isn't going on, then they should be public about it. And we've challenged him to an open debate with me on this issue, and let's hope he accepts. I doubt he will, but let's hope he does. Either way, it's time to put these people on the spot for their endless disinformation. And as this stuff goes on, you know, as the trolls or the paid disinformation people, in many cases which are just someone the public perceives as some professional that is supposed to know, so they choose to believe them. And, you know, how many cases of this do we have to make it obvious that the one thing we can be sure about from the science community, and not in all cases, I mean, there's a lot of good scientists, I'm not slamming all of them, but I mean, from the power structure as a whole, that they simply lie to a degree that can barely be comprehended. I mean, what sane person would put mercury in your mouth for a filling, or inject it into your veins in a vaccine, or so forth, or all the other myriad of toxic elements that are introduced into our lives, our food supply, that we're told is just fine. You know, on that note, isn't it astounding? This is, to me, the epitome of how completely Orwellian our society is. When you have huge groups, I'm going to pick on UNICEF today. It's just an example of the groups who claim their job is to protect the children of the world, while they virtually ignore the poisoning of every child on the planet. Isn't that a paradox? This is a mission statement from UNICEF. UNICEF is mandated by the United Nations, what a surprise, General Assembly, to advocate for the protection of children's rights, to help meet their basic needs, to expand their opportunities, to reach their full potential. Again, while they're being poisoned from the sky, filled with GMO foods, and so forth. Next statement, UNICEF is guided by the Convention on the Rights of Children, of the Child, and strives to establish children's rights as enduring ethical principles and international standards of behavior towards children. By injecting them with toxic vaccinations, really? UNICEF insists that the survival, protection, and development of children are universal development imperatives that are integral to human progress. UNICEF mobilizes political will and material resources to help countries, particularly developing countries, to ensure a first call for children and to build their capacity to form appropriate policies and deliver services for children and their families. All sounds very benevolent, doesn't it? UNICEF is committed to ensure special protection for the most disadvantaged children, victims of war, disaster, war, by the way, that created by the same entities that run UNICEF, disasters, extreme poverty, all forms of violence and exploitation, and those with disabilities. UNICEF responds in emergency protection to protect the rights of children in coordination with the United Nations partners and humanitarian agencies. UNICEF makes its unique facilities for rapid response available to its partners to relieve the suffering of children and those who provide their care. UNICEF is nonpartisan, its cooperation is free of discrimination, and everything it does, the most disadvantaged children and the countries in the greatest need have priority. UNICEF aims through its country programs to promote the equal rights of women and girls, to support their full participation in political, social, and economic development of their communities. UNICEF works with all its partners towards the attainment of substantial human development goals adopted by the world community and the realization of the vision of peace and social progress enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. Wow, that all sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? And at the same time, the same people behind agencies such as UNICEF are virtually poisoning the entire planet with climate engineering, GMO foods, vaccinations, you name it. So this is the sort of hypocrisy that we live in. And people actually buy this, and they contribute to UNICEF. And, you know, it breaks my heart when I see those black children, or any children, whatever country they're in, suffering. It breaks my heart, absolutely breaks my heart. But are we to participate in programs with the very people who are perpetrating the insanity to begin with? Or are we to get at the root of this insanity, to try to stop it? And I advocate the latter is what we should focus all our energy on. So, again, as an example of the insanity we live in with societies who, from professionals who deny the climate engineering, meteorologists who deny what we can see with our own eyes, who expect us to believe whatever they say because they're the quote-unquote expert. They have a little piece of paper from an establishment-ordained, approved institution that says they're the oracle of truth. So we're supposed to ignore what we can see with our own eyes, what we see happening around us, because the quote-unquote approved expert says so. Don't do that. All of us need to think for ourselves, period. We need to move the ball forward by ourselves in the most intelligent, rational ways we can. And And we should see the hypocrisy for what it is around us, from organizations like UNICEF to 1,000 others that are the epitome of human hypocrisy and insanity. A lot of things happening all around us. On the false flag issues, I'm sure everybody's keeping an eye on, or most are, on the situation in Russia, where we have the U.S. and NATO countries trying as hard as they can to start World War III. They're being backed into a corner. The curtain is being pulled back to expose them in so many ways. They become even more dangerous when this happens, and more blatant in everything they do, much more blatant. And this whole scenario around the downed Malaysian jetliner has an odor that's astounding. I mean, it's certainly anything but what the official stories say. And now we have the same rerun. The Washington press corps stating, or the White House spokesman people saying, we have proof that Russia did this. We're not going to show you that proof, but we have proof, and you should believe us that we have this proof. And I would ask anybody rational, what possible reason would Russia have for downing that jet? Putin's not stupid. In fact, I would say Putin, whatever you might think of him, Putin is the smartest guy in the room right now. And he's certainly the only guy keeping a lot of things from getting worse than they already are. Now, again, there's a lot of bad things that have happened in Russia, and I'm not advocating the Russian government as a whole. I'm not saying it's not criminal. But that being said, I can find no plausible, logical reason that Putin would have had anything to do with that. That's the last thing he would have wanted. Just like Assad supposedly launching a chemical weapons attack when the UN inspectors are just moving in to inspect. Why would he do that? Exactly what his enemies want him to do. Why would he do that? People should be able to see this. How many false flags do we have in total that historically have been documented at this point, completely documented, and yet there's no apparent remembrance or recognition by the American population on these false flag events that we've seen so many of? I mean, where would one start? From the sinking of the Lusitania, World War I, to Pearl Harbor, World War II, Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, on up to the Oklahoma City bombing that we're supposed to believe that McVeigh alone carried this out, and on up to 9/11. Now this, I mean, Panama. Where would one start with all these false flag events? I mean, they're endless. And of course, with every false flag event, there's a further encroachment upon rights of society and so forth. That is the goal of the power structure, to eliminate and to clamp down on society. So this is happening right now. For those that don't think it's happening, and I know there's a lot of people in that category that will deny anything, everything. It's astounding. I mean, the people even I'm surrounded with that want to think happy thoughts all the time. And, you know, I'm all for optimism, but make it at least tempered with reality. And so in our forest, there's people in my particular region up here who, no matter how many dead trees you show them, they find some little statement to make to somehow stay in their little happy bubble. And this, the bad part about this, again, I'm not trying to say that we should all be walking around depressed, but we should all be angry, and we should all be realists, and we should all try to effectively combat what's happening. So when I'm pointing out the dead trees, there's people around me that will, if they find a leaf on one tree that's not quite completely dead, they jump up and down and talk about how wonderful that tree looks, which is ludicrous. We know trees are dying around the globe, but that kind of denial is what I'm talking about. The sort of denial that finds some reason or some statement to make to somehow negate the reality that is around all of us. It's happening around all of us. The oceans are dying. You'd think we would have a little bit of this on the headlines right now. We have, I'll read a headline. This is from the Seattle Times. Starfish are just melting. Disease killing 80% of them. A mysterious wasting syndrome is wiping out sea stars along the entire West Coast, with a new flare-up in Washington hitting hard this month and walloping Oregon waters previously unaffected. And this is, the article goes on, a mysterious killer is wiping out the sea stars along the entire west coast of North America, 20 species affected, called sea star wasting syndrome. The outbreak hitting the coast from Alaska to Mexico was first reported from the Olympic National Park last summer and has continued to take out sea stars with merciless efficiency. Entire ecosystems may reshuffle as the top predators of the nearshore succumb. And the summer brings us all out to the beach. A beloved sea creature, the first many children touch or draw, is dissolving before our very eyes. Any headlines on that? No. All you see headlines is still people talking about GDP, the retirements in 20 years, what's going to happen several decades down the road with this or that. It's all nonsense. It's all absolute nonsense. In fact, it's fantasy. It's complete fantasy. So what we have right now, and a lot of people even in, as I've mentioned before, even in the anti-climate engineering community are still not looking at reality either. That's unfortunate. I hope that changes. So just in a very nuts and bolts manner, I'll make this statement, and we'll bring Greg and Russ on. It's important that people understand some very basic factors in our equation. Life exists on Earth because of a very miraculous and delicately balanced energy transfer, which means the amount of thermal energy coming in was roughly equivalent to the amount of energy going out of the atmosphere. When that energy balance is lost, things start to change radically. Too many in the anti-geoengineering movement don't understand these basic laws of physics. When you change the energy balance, you change the entire equation. When you burn 4 billion gallons of hydrocarbon fuel a day, you change the energy balance. A lot of people in the anti-geoengineering movement don't want to believe that. In the climate science community, again, denial, rampant, absolutely rampant. When you have jets flying around the globe, spraying toxic reflective particulates that also reflect heat down, not just heat up, but heat down, altering the hydrological cycle, poisoning the forests, you affect the energy balance. Again, in regard to the ice, which is the cryosphere, if you put ice in a pan and stick it on the stove and you heat it up, the water in that pan will stay cool until that ice dissolves. And when the ice is gone, everything changes immediately because the energy in the ice is being transferred to keeping the water cool. And that's what's happened on planet Earth. That's what has tempered much of the warming that has already been locked in. Now that ice is dissolving, and it is dissolving, it is going away. In fact, even the muchly touted increasing Antarctic sea ice as of a few days ago, the only spot in the globe that was increasing, but highly touted, of course, by all those who want to deny that there's anything wrong with the climate. Now a satellite glitch has been found that appears to have been falsifying that data. How amazing. Who controls the satellites? Well, I think we all know who that is. So even the one pillar on which much of the denial is built, that the climate is imploding, and geoengineering is fueling that fire, by the way, and that's why I'm pushing on geoengineering, but it's not the only thing. It's not the only thing. And the sooner the anti-geoengineering community acknowledges that, the more credibility that we will have, and the more chance there will be of getting the climate science community to wake up also, because our data will be correct then. So I encourage people to just understand there's an energy balance on the planet. People take the planet for granted as if it's some kind of an anvil that you can pound on forever and it won't break. It's broken. It's absolutely broken. So now we have fires burning all over the globe, massive record fires burning at record intensity, pumping CO2 and soot into the atmosphere. That soot, some of those smoke clouds are 2,000 miles wide, 2,000 plus. And that material settles down on the ice that was white. Now it's becoming dark and brown from the soot. It's already melting. It's melting from below. It's melting from above. And now when that soot from those fires settles on the surface of the ice, it decreases the albedo, the reflectivity of that ice. Now the ice begins to absorb 60, 70, 80% more thermal energy from the sun than it did, speeding up the melt-off process even further. So, that being said, planets in meltdown, I hope everybody really diligently investigates that fact. Just because they're under the geoengineered cool-down eastern U.S. doesn't reflect the whole globe. I hope we unite on credible data that we may advance our cause forward and not go in circles. So it's up to everybody to continue that investigation, to have a correct compass heading, not just one that you plugged in 10 years ago when you first became aware of an issue. You have to continue researching. So, Greg, sorry for that long monologue, but I'm trying to point out what's going to be happening in the coming months as the fires increase. I know even in Georgia, where you've seen a lot of rain, you're seeing some dead trees there too, yes?
Yes, there's no doubt about it, Dane. Obviously, you have a little more expertise than I do, and I think you probably have more dead trees than we have here, but we're seeing, even on the property here where I'm building the cabin, I'm paying a lot more attention now to trees, and I'm cutting a lot of firewood right now, so I'm looking through the woods, and we're seeing trees that if they're not dead, they're on their way to being dead. and like you and I have talked about, the geoengineering is certainly making the insects and the diseases much more easy to penetrate those trees when they're already sickly.
That's correct. It's just, again, someone has AIDS. They don't die of AIDS. They die of ailments that are occurring because of the weakened body, the weakened immune system. Now a host of ailments come in. Same with the trees. So, again, it's important for people to understand statistically right now, we are in a runaway greenhouse effect right now. Climate engineering is my main focus. It will stay my main focus, and it's the single greatest assault on the biosphere's life support systems. But I hope people, because I still hear it all the time, every day, people that are so certain that we have done nothing to hurt the planet except geoengineering. And I don't know how they come to that conclusion. And it's not that I'm changing my focus, or it's not that I want them to change their focus, but a recognition of reality is important to have credibility. No credibility, we're not going to knit enough people together in order to win this battle. And we must win this battle. And on that note, I don't know how much you want to share, Greg, with your what you share with me this week. Your battle, again, I don't want to push you into that, but if there's anything you do want to share.
No, you're talking about with my brother?
Yes.
Yep. There's nothing I would hide about that, because I would call him out publicly just like I'm calling him out privately. It saddens me that members of the U.S. military are being brainwashed to the degree that I believe he's being brainwashed, that he told me several years ago, we need to respect Obama and we need to respect the presidency. And my response to that was, I have no problem with respecting the presidency, although the last 4 or 5 certainly have not been working for you or I. But when it comes to respecting Obama, buddy boy, you got a lot of research and studying to do. And I've been hammering his butt for 2 years plus, sending him plenty of evidence that would prove that we probably shouldn't respect Obama. In fact, we should feel very threatened, and we should be working extremely hard to expose Obama and the cabal behind him, probably mostly the cabal behind him, because there'll be a puppet right behind him to replace him when he's gone.
Let everybody know, Greg, I mean, your brother is a high-up personnel in the U.S. military. Maybe you could give a little clue as to...
Yeah, he was a naval aviator, fighter pilot, show pilot for the F-18, and sadly, again, my whole family thinks that if he was truly protecting U.S. interests and protecting me and the rest of my family and fellow American citizens, and I didn't feel like all the military really is being used for evil purposes to further the chances of world government and world banking. That's what it's all about, obviously. You know that, Dane and Russ. And sadly, we're going into these countries losing some of our best young men so that the military-industrial complex can profit, and we can end up with losing our liberties and freedoms that we hold so dear in this country.
If I can, on that note, hold your thought. I want to just elaborate on what you just said, because the U.S. military, who puts out these simplistic messages on their TV commercials to try to recruit our young, our sons and our daughters, and they state, the final statement is on one of the big military commercials, is asking for people to enlist, is the Navy, a global force for good. How simplistic can that be? We're good, they're bad. At this point, people need to understand the military is not about the common good of the U.S. citizen. It's about the quote-unquote interest. When they say U.S. interest, that means the interest of the global elite. Doesn't mean you or I. It means protecting the global elite in whatever crimes they choose to commit. That's what it means. And when it comes down to whatever definition people want to put into, quote, U.S. interest, if U.S. interest means that I have to, or my lifestyle is going to be supported on the backs of poor Africans or whoever by exploiting their resources, I don't want those resources. I don't want it. I do not want to improve my lifestyle at the expense of another human being. That's not okay. So, and this is what the U.S. military is about. And in this case, it's about the interest of the global elite. But sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and these guys are so deep in the matrix that it's like you said, Dane, any threat to that way of life, any threat to the hockey games and the wealth and the vacations and the new motorhomes and just distraction after distraction after distraction. And let's not look at reality. They're so engaged with that matrix that's so addictive and so seductive that they don't see the forest for the trees. They don't want to see the forest for the trees. It's easier to claim ignorance, except that I'm not going to let him claim ignorance.
Your brother, obviously a very intelligent guy. You mentioned another fighter pilot that's a friend that was apparently one of the best in the military, and that this can be denied by anybody, not just by them, but by anybody. What kind of a society do we live in? What kind of a reality do we live in when what we can see with our own eyes, that any functional sense of reason would say something's going on up there, something profound, and we have mountains of documents to back up the fact that these programs are going on, including lab tests and everything else? What sort of society do you live in that denial is so total that this can even be a debatable point? Isn't it astounding? Russ?
Yeah, let me ask.
Greg, go
you
ahead.
live in a sick society. You live in a very sick society, Dane. That's the answer.
It is. It truly is. And there are, in fact, a lot of people, as you just correctly stated, Greg, that when it comes right down to it, they don't really care what has to happen to keep their party going. They don't care. And when a society's at that point, I'm not certainly singling out everybody, but there's plenty that feel that way. I know enough of them. Something has to give. Something has to change. You know, and even with 9/11, again, when it comes right down to it, I know people who are okay with whatever our government had to do there, blowing up those buildings and blaming it on a diabetic Arab in a cave in Afghanistan or wherever the hell he was. They're okay with any of that as long as it keeps their particular parade going. They don't care. And at that point, society has lost its way, completely lost its way. When people are willing to accept the benefit of another person's suffering, that's when society must hit the wall. And I don't see any other outcome from where we're heading but hitting the wall. But sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. And I would argue this is a process we must go through. Collapse must happen. And that is the first step toward any possibility of things getting better in any way that matters. Russ, you know, all this, we just talked about the false flag situations, the sort of people who will accept any event as long as it doesn't affect them and as long as it betters their situation somehow. That mentality is pretty rampant in the U.S., wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is pretty rampant everywhere. I think that we have too much greed and too much selfishness. People have to realize that if we do not protect our collective home, if we don't protect where if we don't look out for each other, we're not looking out for ourselves. You know, these are basic principles. And it's funny, you know what happens is over and over throughout history, civilizations collapse. And they don't learn the lessons. And everybody thinks education is the key. If we just tell the people, then they will change. But education, unfortunately, is not the key because it's really a moral issue because people are not willing to listen to the truth even when the evidence is confronted.
Well, not education in the way that our system puts it out. I mean, our system puts out education that is basically nothing more than a programming of people from the time they're first able to even think, and you know, it conditions them to be what they are, which is a pretty dismal statement at this point. So, yeah, education won't matter. Right now, even you see the commercials about get this career or that career if you go to this university, and it's not going to happen. With our reality, it's not going to happen. Well, all this pursuit of some decades down the road goal is being pushed by the media. The ship is virtually going down by the day. So,
well, I think, Dane, it really goes beyond just the education system. I mean, we can go out and tell people about the geoengineering and the damage it's doing, and you'll be lucky to get a fraction of people to listen to you. You know, and more people are listening. You know, fortunately, we are making progress, but this has been going on in mass. This has been going on in mass. Oh, hold on, somebody's on here. This has been going on in mass for a long time. And how long is it going to take till people, unfortunately, people need to know that it affects them personally before they get involved. And that's the problem. We can show them the evidence, we can show them the patents, we can show them the water tests and all this stuff that's going on. But unfortunately, people just wait until they're personally affected. And that's what I mean. And I know we have to educate people, and there is a certain segment of the population that is picking up on this and is growing, which is very fortunate. But in mass, the problem is there's too much selfishness. We have to realize that we have to look out for each other. And if we see somebody else who is sick, who says, hey, I'm being affected by these geoengineering programs, we have to realize some people are more sensitive. And it's only a matter of time before it gets those who are not as sensitive.
If it'll kill trees around the globe, it'll damn sure kill us. And the trees around the globe are dying by the day. And this is it's astounding how many people ignore this. Again, I know people that apparently are still able to grow something in their garden because they spent maybe a couple $1,000s for soil augmentation in order to get something to grow in soils that used to produce fine with nothing. And these are the same kind of denialists that I talked about earlier, that you can't get them to face any reality and help in the fight because they just want to think happy thoughts and stay in their bubble. And if they have to spend $2,000 on soil amendment to get $50 worth of vegetables, they're still okay. And next year it'll be $5,000 worth of soil amendments and shading and everything else to get a few dollars worth of vegetables. You can't live that way. Can't continue that way, period.
And Dane, I saw this happen in my own garden. We had 2 weeks of intense spraying, all just out of character spraying that happened 2 years ago, and about 4 different species of plants just died in that 2 weeks. They just shriveled up and died, and there was no explanation except for the one that's obvious.
Well, again, go ahead, Greg.
Gardens are not doing well because I keep multiple gardens, and I don't have quite as much time here to tend them as I normally would. But my Lord, it's hard to grow a tomato anymore.
It's real hard. A lot of organisms are not fruiting. They're not producing seeds. They're dying. A very, very well-done tree die-off video was just brought to my attention. We're going to post that probably tomorrow. Very well done from around the globe.
Not only that, and if you can get something to grow, aluminum uptake will reduce other mineral uptake because the plant tries to protect itself, and your yields are much smaller. Your main root system is smaller, and they also can't reach as deep for the water. They
can't. You're right. And then the desiccants are drying out the climate. Here, the humidities in California are less than half the historical norms. And I know for people back east, it's hard for them to comprehend that what's outside their window is not everywhere. But the heat here is intolerable. It's absolutely intolerable. And I did another trip into the woods several days ago, about 36 hours. Going to film some of this here probably next week. But the amount of thermal energy being absorbed by everything, including the water, again, when the UV is where it's at. And it's, we're taking readings again now. I had a little bit of a lapse in the readings because lost the tech who was doing that for me, but we've got another one online now. But I'm taking it myself at times, too, when my schedule permits. But the UV, again, 1,200% or more UVB, more than what we're being told. So this causes much more thermal energy absorption. Many people notice that even if the ambient temperature is not hot, you get a good straight shot of sunshine and you can really feel it. So the waters are heating up. So now, 3 days ago, I went down about a 3/4 mile section of one of the premier trout streams in Northern California, the Pitt River. And this is a big river. This is a couple hundred feet wide in most places and a lot of water, rapids, and so forth. And I went down about a 3/4 mile section on the bottom, under the rapids, around a lot of the deep pools. There's not a single trout in the section I went down, and the water's simply too warm. It's way too warm now. The trout can't live there, and there's not very many bass, and I found no crawdads, none, no crayfish, and usually there's lots of crayfish in the water. So what are the fish eating? And if you try to fish with a pole, the fish bite anything because they're starving. They're absolutely starving. There's nothing to eat. So the collapse is happening right now, and even the local fishing shops, one of the big ones, you have a lot of big ones in Northern California, but you go in there and try to talk to these guys, and their business is being hammered from what's happening, and they just can't bring themselves to even consider this reality. And that's sort of a self-imposed denial that we have in society, but it won't last long. I argue, again, it won't last long because of the conditions that are unfolding now by the day. But Greg, your situation is most interesting to me because that's the frontline battle. What you're going through is exactly the scenario that when I've tried to advocate on this issue the whole time, that if we can just bring it to the light of day, then families who have members in the military, that will start these battles going. And as yours is the poster example of that. And your mom's not with you yet either, but at some point... Go ahead.
My mother, when I decided to run for Congress a couple of years ago because I was so aggravated, she said, let somebody else do that. That could be dangerous, and, the problem is when you make the decision to do these kind of things, you're raising the bar, and you're asking people to go against every core belief that they've been cultured to believe, the idea that, like you said, our U.S. military is a force for good. So all my sisters and extended family even all think that, my brother's a hero. And to me, if he has knowledge of this spraying, which I don't see how he couldn't, I just don't think he's that stupid. And he said in a comment, I think I ran that thread by you, Dane, he said, well, I'll let some of my PhD friends look at it. Like Russ said, this is not about education. This is about morality. So you can have a whole lot of education working for the system that is not going to buck that system. And it also goes into the feminization of men. Nobody's willing to stand up for what's right. Nobody's willing to stand alone against their entire family, which is what I'm doing right now, my entire extended family. My brother's son liked Dane Wigington Goes to Washington. That's what I called your Mount Shasta meeting, Dane, as you know. And my brother's son liked it. My brother's girlfriend liked it. So I am coaxing him and demanding that he come out and tell the truth and do what's right. And I could give a flip what his PhD friends say, because I wouldn't put wouldn't put an ounce of faith in any word that came out of their mouths, because I'm sure they're paid by the same system that is trying to suppress what's really going on.
Not only that, Greg...
I'm aggravated, as you can tell from my tone.
I don't blame you.
It wears you down.
I'm aggravated too. I totally agree with you. This is the largest crime against humanity in human history. Nothing comes close to what the destruction that we are in the midst of right now. This is the time in which heroes are made. So people who are willing to stand up today are heroes like no other.
Well,
and that's what I tell everybody, Dane. Dane, you are a hero. I've never had a hero in my life, and I'm not saying this just because I'm on your show. You really are acting like a hero should. And when I see people say, someone in my family, Dane, he's an idiot. Don't even go there. Don't even think about going there. Because this man, I told my brother, and I told his buddy, best fighter pilot in the Navy, you better have respect for this man, because he's risking his life for you. And I've risked my life for you, and you better have respect.
But, isn't it a sad... I appreciate your support, Greg, but I'm only doing what any decent father or any decent man would do. And it's just a sad state to society that everybody is not doing what a lot of us in this movement are doing. You, Russ, and every other activist that's listening, all of them, everyone, are the type of character you just described. Every single one. Everybody who's helped in whatever position they're in, from the mother to the to a lot of the kids in schools that are choosing to be ridiculed because they're helping with this, and every single person who's pulling in this battle is exactly the character you described. And we're simply doing what we should do. And the fact that we live in a society where that's unfortunately become unusual is a sad statement. It's a sad statement to society. It truly is, because all of us are just simply doing what any rational person would do. We just don't have a lot of reason in our society right now, but it is growing. It takes
courage. It takes courage, and the problem today is we have a lack of courage. It is easy to go along with the establishment and say, oh, well, I'm not going to believe this or that, but it's hard to stand up against the flow and say, yes, it is different, that this information is true, even though it's hard to hear, and it takes a lot of courage. And without courage, we cannot have freedom.
And there's a lot of courage.
Well, it's not... It's not politically correct to have courage, Russ. We're
Not
supposed
right now,
to be, we take our sodium fluoride, eat our Roundup sprayed food, and just go to sleep and ignore the tyranny.
That's right. And without courage, freedom dies very quickly, and that's what we're seeing happen right now.
When you see that courage, there's a friend in Canada I have, and his son did a presentation on climate engineering in his class, and did an excellent job. I mean, this is an 11-year-old boy, I believe, in that range. And when I see something like that and the courage that he showed, I mean, that's inspiring. That's absolutely inspiring for me. And then on the flip side, when I see, and I'm going to read an email right now that was sent to me from someone who just had an exchange with Ken Caldera, who I've had enough exchanges with him like this, but this is telltale. And we see the cowardice, absolute, total, inexcusable, criminal cowardice from people like Ken Caldera. And this is a direct quote from Ken. He answers to this person: "I do not believe that there is any intentional spraying of the atmosphere going on aimed at altering climate. There are plenty of pesticides, and there is some cloud seeding. Our government routinely lies." So this is where the disinformation, he tries to act like he's being honest by saying, yes, the government lies, but then he covers up the biggest crime of all. That's what they're paid to do. Our government routinely lies to us, so it's hard to tell when government officials are telling the truth. There is no chemtrails. Now, that should be a big alarm. That should be a huge alarm. Now, and this person cited the fact that she never mentioned the word chemtrails to him. She says, I had never, in the letter, I had never mentioned that term. That was Ken's, not mine. So Ken takes it upon himself to say there is no chemtrails. Maybe that's how he rationalizes with himself that we're talking about geoengineering and he doesn't recognize the chemtrails term. But how could any academician make that statement? It's a blatant, glaring lie. Under any circumstances, how could he possibly make such a definitive statement? And when Simon Donner, the globally recognized climatologist from UC British Columbia, I was on the air with him. I've mentioned this before, but it's telling because it's like this. Simon Donner made exactly the same statement on the air with me. He said, I know it looks like they're spraying, but I know for certain they're not. Why are these guys saying things that sound similar? Who's pulling their chain? And when I tried to corner Simon Donner on the air by saying, Simon, as a scientist, you're telling me that you can definitively say you know there's no spraying, off the air. I was gone. They unplugged me instantly. That's what you have. Those are our academicians. Those are our PhDs. Those are the official liars for the power structure. And these people should be held as accomplices in this crime. Every single one of them should be tried. If we can bring this to the light of day, they should be tried, just like the Nuremberg trials. All those who should have known, all those who should have spoken out, all those who lied to protect the establishment are part of the crime. And people need to understand this. They absolutely need to understand. Here's how Caldera signs off. I prefer to spend my time working on real threats to our planet, not imaginary threats. Therefore, I will not spend any more time with chemtrail conspiracy theories. Ken Caldera, if people want to rattle Ken's cage, do it. Email him, and he's sensitive. He's very sensitive. He's a spineless coward, and they're all sensitive once they know they have a light shown on them. There's exposés, current ones and new ones coming on the disinformation directory on Ken Caldera, and he is the epitome of a spineless, coward criminal. Ken Caldera. I encourage everybody to pursue him.
Not only that, Dane, is they don't get into that position unless they hold the right attitudes. They're given those positions. This happened with Dr. Boyd Haley, who started uncovering the connection between mercury and autism. He found out the testosterone, the B12, the cysteine connection with autism, which was really, really started pointing at vaccines. And guess what? They pulled all this funding. No more funding for mercury. You lose your position, you lose your money if you don't have the right position.
There you go.
And God knows in our society now, it's all about the Benjamins, baby.
It is. It is. It's unfortunate. It's not going to matter soon. People counting their money, it's not going to matter at all. When the planet can't support any of us, it's not going to matter. So that's where the wake-up needs to happen. And not just from the, again, incredibly cowardice science community that we have. And I know some of these people, too. And I mean, I have no words for them at this point. I won't, even though I have long histories with some of them, I won't acknowledge them. I certainly wouldn't shake their hand under any circumstances. And I have absolutely no regard for them whatsoever and their part in this criminal endeavor, their part in the denial. But we also have, again, even in the environmentalist communities and so forth, I've spoken to people who want to make themselves feel they're some defender of the environment while they ignore the house burning down. And I've talked to some that feel if we all just had a garden in our front yard, the planet could support 15 billion people. They live in a fantasy world as well. People need to wake up and be realists. The planet's not going to support the 7 billion that's here. It's not supporting them now. We're headed downhill at a absolutely free fall speed. The die-off is here. It's happening now.
Dane, we have a question from this chat room when you're ready.
Fire away, Russ. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got someone asking, please ask Dane if we test our trees, how we test our trees for metals, and ask what lab we go to. What can you help with that?
I would not waste your time. I've done expensive lab tests on trees, even with core drilling in the field with USDA soil scientists. Those cores were tested to see if there was any notable uptake in either in the Cambrian layer or the cores for the last 10 years. If there's any there, it's very small. The bottom line is, with many trees, not all, but many, they shut down their nutrient uptake when they detect this bioavailable metal in the case of aluminum. So that type of testing is expensive. I spent quite a bit on that, and it was not productive. The bottom line is this. If it's in the rain, it's in the soils, it's in the waters, it's affecting the roots, it's there, period. Always go back to the source. If it's in the rain, it's everywhere. It's that simple. Rain test is easy to do. Test the beginning part of the storm. That's when the spraying is generally the heaviest, especially if you have a front that's moving, not just a convective cell as you'd have with monsoonal moisture. But it's best to test the more jet stream maneuvered fronts that in the leading edge of that where you have the ARs, the atmospheric river, best to test under those conditions. Again, if it's in the rain, it's everywhere. When you take that sample, it's imperative that you have a clean glass or plastic container, and you can't let that sample sit for any length of time because those particulates will adhere. They'll adhere to the sides of the sample container. You have to resuspend them right before the test. That's important. So anyway...
And we did this test in Maine, tested for all kinds of metals. Aluminum, 300 parts per billion, 6 times higher than is allowed in drinking water by the EPA. 6 times.
And don't think of what people shouldn't consider what's allowed by the EPA as being anything remotely close to normal. Aluminum shouldn't be in our water. Period. Should not be in our water. So just because they have
they keep raising the EPA limits.
Exactly. Same with radiation. And also, again, it's important for people to remember if they're doing lab testing. A lot of the labs have raised their minimum detection levels astronomically, which means you have to have a hell of a lot of material in that sample for it even to show up. So you have to find a lab that has low detection levels. In the case of aluminum, they should be able to detect down to 0.1 ppb, parts per billion, which is UGL. So it's important to check the lab's testing levels. But the metal's there. At this point, there's so much data out there, I would hope people would spend more time disseminating the data we already have. Take a test if you want to, but don't spend loads of time on that because we don't have much time. We need to get the word out fast. In fact, now that this Shasta presentation took place, I just got a call from people from Siskiyou County who now, this is another Northern California county, who want to put this on the agenda in front of their supervisors, people who were not normally in this fight, who are not part of the choir, ranchers, farmers. That's what I'm talking about now. They want it in front of their board. They want to get to the bottom of this issue. So now the denial of the public officials is starting to go away because they're starting to realize they're going to be responsible. If there's a functional society, when we get this to light, if there's any functioning societal legal system at all, these people will be held responsible. They will. And it's on the record now. Every time, just like with Shasta County, that they were given data 6 years ago, I presented in front of the board, and now there's enough groundwork done where we had a unanimous decision to investigate further. We're not just letting it go at that. We're continuing to follow up whatever they're doing, how they're doing it, and what processes they're taking. So, but again, the conditions on the ground are deteriorating so rapidly. The feedback loops for the climate that have all been triggered, some 25 or 30 feedback loops, are in free fall. I mean, it's right now our planet is changing by the day. It's literally changing by. Can't hide it for much longer. So now is the time when the seeds that all of us plant will find fertile ground with people who can no longer hide in their bubble of denial. They can't hide there any longer. So I encourage people to look at hard data. Go look at the Arctic methane emergency. Look at, and even though these scientists are not admitting to the geoengineering, the data on the ground for what's happening is still valid. You have to sift the baby from the bathwater. So
we've got callers too when you're ready, Dean.
I'll get that in 1 second. We have methane spewing in the atmosphere. It's covering the continental U.S. It's going to ever lower latitudes. We're seeing noctilucent clouds in the sky. We appear to have Project Lucy and Project Alamo in full swing, which is the use of the globe's ionosphere heaters to blast the atmosphere with radio frequency in a desperate, vain, and destructive attempt to degrade the methane that's already there. Everything is completely out of control right now, completely. And we see the power structure demonstrating how desperate they are. We're trying to start World War III. So everybody needs to get up to speed, start planting seeds, do it effectively, efficiently, and if we have a window to get this to light, it's right now. We have to do it now. Russ, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. You said very quickly about they're trying to cover this up by starting World War III, or that's part of the process, and I agree with you. I mean, we have to be very, very aware of how these things work. Caller with your phone number that ends in 40, you're on. Who are we speaking with?
Yeah, this is Steve from Nikiski, Alaska.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to call and let everybody know that the trees up here on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska, the birch trees especially, are dying. The leaves are really, really small. The trees are really thin-looking. You can see right through them. I've lived here for 20 years now, and this is the worst I've ever seen it. People just don't notice it. I even pointed out, and they're just totally in denial. But the trees are definitely dying, and the spruce trees, we have white spruce and black spruce, and they're coning out in mass. All of the older spruce trees, even the younger ones, some of the younger ones are just full of cones.
That's a sign they think they're going to die. That's generally a sign that, yeah.
They're coning out in such mass that they're breaking the top branches off. And so both the spruce trees and the birch trees are in distress.
So for people who don't know, coning out, what is that and what does it mean then?
It's a stress response, and a lot of conifers do that. If they feel they're about to die, they're trying to perpetuate their DNA, so they go to cone.
Okay, that means they grow a bunch of cones, essentially.
Yes.
Is what you're saying. Okay, all right.
Yes,
another thing is it looks as though the birch trees are, not only are they having smaller leaves, like half the size they normally are, they're, you could just tell they're struggling. They're thin, and I forget what I was trying to get at here, but.
Well, think about it for a second.
If you're willing to, document some of that and pen a short article, the summary of that, we would like to see that, post it, and help get the word out.
Another site I go to is I get on Chemtrail Truth and do a little bit of blogging there and put some pictures on, but all of these sites are great, but I really love yours. It's the one that I direct people to. I own a pizza business here in Nikiski, Alaska, and I handwrite on the boxes about 130 to 150 pizzas a day. I put on there GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Please go to. I draw a little picture of some jets flying with trails, and I think it's working. My community seems to be waking up, and it's the best way I could find to wake people up is to use your site and direct them to it so they can get the right information. All the documentation's there, and it's a really great place to do it. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
We brought up courage earlier in the conversation, and I tried to allude to the kind of people, all of whom out there are showing tremendous courage, exactly like what you just described that you're doing. I feel the deepest gratitude toward you for having the courage with a business, with customers. What kind of world would we live in if everybody had even a fraction of the courage that you're showing by doing what you're doing? How different would our world be if people weren't afraid to lose a customer here or there by speaking the truth? If they held the truth.
My business isn't suffering at all. Business is picking up. We have a lot of oil industry here in the area, so we've got more business coming. There's really a big boom in the oil industry here in Cook Inlet, so I'm getting a lot of new customers, but it's not hurting my business. And I urge people who have an outlet or a way to do what I'm doing to do it. And I figured out, the first couple of weeks that I did this, I was using your flyer, and I printed them and I was using them, putting them on boxes. But I realized that the handwritten note, the handwritten website with some artwork on the pizza box really gets their attention. It's something personal. It's something that I took the time to write with my own handwriting, and it means something more. I think people, when they're eating their pizza, they go right to their computer and they go right to your site, and I think it's really working. So I urge people, if you have...
I'd like to talk to you more about the trees and everything you're doing, but if you could hang with us till even after we're off the air in 5 minutes, do you have that much time?
That would be great, Dane. Thank you.
Yeah, hang with us.
I appreciate all you do. You are a true hero of humanity, all of you guys. And
no less than you. No less than you. I mean, what you're doing is every bit as important as what we're doing. It's all of us pulling together that matters, and everybody listening to take an example from what you've done. And if everybody engaged in that, our equation will change. We will get this to light in time to do something about it. And that type of courageous effort, I mean, needs to be applauded. And
I have two boys, a 9 and a 6-year-old, and I see them playing outside, and I see the trails over their heads, and I can taste it too. I think it's Randy that tastes it. I can taste this stuff in the air. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I'm one of those people too, Steve. It's good to meet you.
I could taste metal, and another thing I've been doing lately is I've been looking out my back window of my house at night. I can see the particulates falling. I have a light on the side of the house, and if I get at the right angle where it blocks the light directly in my eye, and I look out through the yard, I can see this particulate falling.
But isn't it astounding? You know, a lot of people, especially the disinformation trolls, they make fun and ridicule of the notion that someone could actually taste a metallic taste in their mouth. And isn't it astounding? This goes back to what I talked to earlier in the show about the sort of conditioning society has. Is there anything surprising about smelling a forest fire from a long distance? Anybody can smell that. It's a particulate in the air that has a particular odor, that has a specific odor. There's nothing astounding about that. Why would this be any different? So I certainly acknowledge, even though I don't quite have the same sensation, I acknowledge that many people do, and that needs to be recognized. I mean, the mathematical amount of material that's coming from the sky is enormous. So why would we not have some sensation of it?
Dane, we have another caller.
I wanted to mention too that I recently just woke up to this about 6 or 8 months ago. I had seen trails in the last couple of years up here in Alaska, but this spring I want people to know that since January or December or January, this thing's ramped up 10 times.
That's because the methane is spewing in the Arctic, and they're doing what they know how to do: make it worse. Yeah. They're throwing even more fuel on the fire because that's what they're paid to do. But stick with us. Let me grab this last call and stick with us until the end of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for what you're doing, Steve. I'm one of them who senses them too. I've had a small army of people who contact me who can taste it and smell it in the air.
I've been listening to your shows. I've been going back to the archives, and I've heard you mention it. And I'm glad to hear it. You know, I've found a few other people that can taste it also.
Yep.
But it's on certain days, and you can tell when they are. And,
yeah. In fact, I had a new person contact me just today about it. I have people contacting me all the time about it. Thank you.
Stick with us, Steve. Hey, Russ, there's one quick question from this last caller. Stick with us, Steve. Let's grab that real quick.
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes. Caller with your phone number that ends in 78. Who are we speaking with?
Quick question.
Hi there, this is Kathleen, and hi to Dane and Russ, and that was a nice caller. The Alaska caller had a lot of good information. Hi. So this is just to add on to the tree stuff because I work in Maryland, and in the parking lot, almost every single tree is just like totally desiccated. But there's a whole big bunch of trees that are all the same that are just like full of fungus on their trunks. As you look around, when I'm up on the 3rd floor of the building, and I look down over trees, you can just see that you can see the trees. The leaves are desiccated. The branches are not all covered. They're dying. Dying back. And on my block where I live, there's an overwhelming amount of trees that are dying.
This is Kathleen Gable?
Yes, it is.
Kathleen, I want to say on the air because I deal with a couple of Kathleens, but none more than you, Kathleen. For the record, Kathleen has been an immense help to me with helping to root out data from a lot of sources. So I just want to publicly express my gratitude toward you, Kathleen. I mean, it's the kind of help that's helped our whole process. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen.
Kathleen, you can hang with us too. Stay on the line with us, Kathleen, if you would.
All right, this is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of Dane Wigington and Greg Palin. We're on every Saturday at UCY.tv at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week at UCY TV. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.